Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. We're continuing our deep dive into this radical feminist book, and it's been insightful into their radicalism, but also it shows us where Islam is superior. And so let's continue to do some textual analysis on her work and to come up with rebuttals that'll help people to stay firm in their faith. Let's begin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay. Millennials have had to learn to live without security, but that doesn't mean we have to live without commitment or community or care. This is what the theorist Sophie Lewis calls full surrogacy, a radical alternative to the patriarchal family unit. Okay, so who's this lady? Sophie Lewis. Full surrogacy. Surrogacy should be illegal. Okay. Thinking beyond the family as a way to organize a life of intimacy, care, and commitment makes economic sense, and it makes social sense. It does not, however, make cultural sense. It is still taboo to suggest that the two-parent heterosexual nuclear family, which is how most modern societies insist on defining a family, might not be the ideal way for everyone. Okay, so two-parent heterosexual family. Now, I wonder what she would say to an Islamic polygamy situation. Would she be for or against that? I really do wonder. It sounds to me like she wants all those... Okay, so if you follow some accounts on X, formerly known as Twitter, you'll see like blue-haired people with a septum piercing, and they will have like a trans kid and then a non-binary kid, and they're all living under one roof, and sometimes it's a woman with 3 boyfriends, or like a guy who has a wife and then a boyfriend. It's a pretty weird living situation, but I think that's what she's getting at. It is taboo to mention the fact that for women, children, and queer youth, the family can often be a place of violence and abuse rather than the balm against an uncaring world that is supposed to provide. The withering away of nurturing social structures outside the individual family makes it undoubtedly uncomfortable to imagine that the family itself might be failing us. The family itself, I would argue, isn't failing. It's that we have a very strange system now of moral decay. I look at my family when I was a kid, and I can totally see how liberalism and lack of religious fervor caused quite a lot of decay, and I stand by that, regardless of what this woman says. The ideology of the family is fundamentally authoritarian. In fact, the attachment to the ideal of a male-headed, straight, nuclear household is at the heart of conservative thought. The strict father model. So what do you want? Okay, I didn't have a strict father. He was very laissez-faire, and that was wrong because then you don't have any boundaries. My grandpa tried, but he was at work all the time, and I wasn't raised with my dad, but when I was around him, he was definitely not someone who you would call conservative. According to linguist and researcher George Lakoff, is the unifying metaphor that guides our collective political imagination. This is organizing metaphor or frame, meaning that it perhaps shapes how people see the world, how they understand their place in it, how they define right and wrong. This strict father model is fundamentally authoritarian. So she's using the... Okay, so let's look at this word authoritarian. Okay, the good and the bad. Because you'll see this a lot with leftists, is that they will take a word and beat it into the ground until it has no more potency because they over apply it. They did this with Nazi, and they did this with fascists, and they did this with racists, and they did this with misogynists. So no matter which way you square it, these people will declare everything is authoritarian. So your father doesn't want you to wear a miniskirt and go get drunk and then get railed by the football team. Oh, he's authoritarian. They never ask the question, what does it feel like for a girl not to have a father who cares? Did they ever interview girls who wish that they would have had that, and how not having have had that impacted them? And why is it that so many women who don't have a father figure have mental health issues, don't know how to maintain male relationships, have very low self-esteem, and go into adult content, or they go into prostituting themselves, right? You really have to examine that. You really do. And I think it's time for that conversation. One thing I will give the Red Pill podcasters is that they push a lot of tough questions onto the women who do such content, who do such filth. And I find that to be quite valuable. For those who subscribe to it, the world is a dangerous, competitive place, and what is needed in this kind of world is a strong, strict father who can protect the family, and what is required of the child is obedience. Okay, yes, but why are you framing that in a negative light? Has this woman ever tried to deal with a teenager, like a male teenager who won't obey? What is the mom supposed to do? Call the police? Some boys, they don't respect their mom, they're not gonna listen. They don't care if their mom cries. They need to have that male authoritarian figure. They need to have that. And when they don't have that, they don't know the boundaries of their own testosterone, their own behavior, and how they're supposed to act in the world. There's a reason why so many women would be like, oh, I wish I could send my teenage son to a military school. And why is it that the gangs, when they go recruiting, they pick out these fatherless boys? That's something to think about, isn't it? In other words, the ideal of the nuclear heterosexual household ruled by a stern male figure with a woman and children subservient to his authority is an ideal on more than merely a practical individual level. The family ideal is a forming metaphor in human societies. Today's conservatives see themselves as part of the world, which ought to be guided and disciplined by strict fathers, and this quite literally is the meaning of patriarchy. The word means not rule by men, but rule by fathers, which is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained. Men are the caretakers of women. Lakoff points out that there is an explicit connection between the strict father worldview and free market capitalism. So do you see what she's doing here? She's attacking an economic order as well as a social order at the same time. And by doing so, she's able to say, we need socialism and we need a matriarchy, right? You look at the antithesis of what she's getting at. The link is the morality of self-interest, which is the conservative version of Adam Smith's view of capitalism. I had a playlist of Adam Smith. I think I deleted it because the lighting was so bad. That was like when I didn't really know how to use a computer really well. In a world of winners and losers based on savage competition, strict fathers are necessary to instill discipline and protect the children from harm. Okay, so there's always going to be savage competition, and if you see how people behaved during the lockdowns, they went and took all the hand sanitizer, they hoarded toilet paper, people pushing and shoving. Even if you look on Black Friday sales, older videos where people were just elbowing each other and fighting over Victoria's Secret underwears, and TVs from Best Buy, it's competitive and people get wild. And so, as Thomas Hobbes has notably pointed out, in the state of nature, life is nasty, brutish, and short. And there's always going to be that. And a woman cannot out-dominate a man. She is cunning in different ways, but she can't pretend to be a man. A woman cannot instill discipline as much as a father can. Your nerves can only take so much. That's why you'll see so many women, they're just screaming at their newborns. They go into a psychosis. They can't handle certain levels of stress. You know, you have to be very careful when it comes to women to see their limits. It's crazy. You'll see some women who I've shared in the community tab and on the crime playlist, they drown their children because they can't handle the stress. You know, you have to be so mindful of what happens. And a female soldier is not as strong as a male soldier, so it's smarter to send the men to protect than the women. This is also how the ideal government should behave, which is why conservatives are not against government per se. They tend to support lavish spending on policing. So here, remember how I told you the defund police movement? Okay, so lavish spending on policing. This woman is complaining that there's a strict father model. She's promoting single motherhood. She's promoting the tearing apart of the patriarchal family unit, okay? And is contending that, you know, the child is required to be obedient, and that's framed as a negative thing. But then she doesn't want policing. So when you have these young boys who don't have a father figure, who can't be disciplined by their mother, and they're not into obedience out there in the street causing havoc, the police are the ones who have to pick up where the father left off, where the mother failed. And when you're pregnant and you're pushing the stroller and you see a cop car, you need to feel at ease, okay? Now, if you see some thugs drinking a 40 ounce on the corner and you're pushing your stroller, you have to hope and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they're not going to hurt you. There are a lot of men who don't give a damn about women and children. And there are plenty of women. If you just scroll through fight videos, I saw one today where a woman in a Walmart started punching on a woman while she was holding a toddler. So a lot of women are very, very violent as well, and they love to pull hair and roll around on the floor. And it's countless times you'll see women go into fast food places, and when they have a tantrum, they grab the cash register, throw it, they mess up the display. You'll see women destroying private property when they can't control their emotions, and the police have to come and regulate those women because the workers are being terrorized. So yes, you do need more police, okay? People will dress like gangbangers and then get mad when the police profile them. So they want to look the part and then pretend that they're not playing the part. This doesn't make sense. If you wear a uniform of a hooker and then get mad when people think you're a hooker, that's your fault, because the way you dress is how you want to be addressed. If I wore a doctor suit and someone said, "Doctor, we need help," and I get mad at them, well then, like, what's going on here? Yes, you shouldn't judge every book by its cover, but to pretend that a police officer doesn't have some logical reasons to suspect a suspicious looking individual based on patterns is absurd. The penal system and the military. So penal system, so corrections. So in the military. So she doesn't want the military to be funded, she doesn't want the police to be funded, and she doesn't want the prison system to be funded. So for a woman who hates men protecting women, she sure does go out of her way to make it easier for male criminals to hurt women and children. What conservatives are against, according to Lakoff, is nurturance and care. They are against social programs that take care of people. Early childhood education, Medicaid for the poor, raising the minimum wage. So when you raise the minimum wage, I saw this myself. The prices do go up, and that the cost is put off onto the customers, and then the customers complain that they don't have money to pay for the certain places. So it doesn't really, like, you still want, it seems that wages, inflation, taxes are all related. Maybe it's not really about raising the minimum wage, but cutting taxes. That could be a huge thing, and regulating inflation. Unemployment benefits, that is what they are trying to eliminate on moral grounds. So early childhood education is important, but one must ask now, well, what is this education? Is it really education? Because American public schools, they're really not that great. Really not great. And certain social programs, they're just dysfunctional. And I do have a lot of respect for people who only use public programs when they absolutely need it, and then they get off of it when they don't need it. Because there are definitely people who take advantage of the system, and some they want to be on the teat forever, and that's not sustainable. Patriarchal morality is still a governing ideology in the modern world, and it has led to the modern world into terrible danger. In recent decades, it has become more and more clear that the strict father model does not serve the interests of human flourishing on a metaphorical or literal level. The strict father model does work. And you'll see girls who had good dads, some of them make terrible choices, but on average they have very good self-assurance. They don't really suffer from low self-esteem. When you meet a daughter who really loves her dad and her dad was great, you can see that they got something you didn't when you realize you're fatherless. It's something real. The blessing of a good father who protects you from bad men is important. Without systems in place to encourage mutual care and nurturance, human societies cannot flourish. A society based on dominance, violence, and short-term competition will tear itself apart. Okay, so dominance, violence, competition. Opposite of violence, peace. Opposite of dominance is subservience. And cooperation is a form of subservience, okay? Of serving. So she doesn't want the woman to be dominated, and she doesn't want anyone in the society to be dominated, but she is ignoring how the Communist Party of China dominates its people. Okay? So she's against capitalism, so this only leaves room for communism or socialism. And the communists are not too kind to the Muslims, and they do rule with a social credit score. And that's how they dominate and regulate the people and govern the people. Okay? Violence, well, there's a obviously we both know there's a spectrum. Peace is only maintained through the threat of violence. So when I go somewhere, I know that person will hit me, and maybe they know I'll hit them. And so the way we talk to each other is very regulated. It's very calculated. Not to piss them off, and they better not piss me off. Because we both want to get to our destination. And so an armed society is a polite society, ideally. You don't want rampant violence, but you want to know that a person is capable of it, so you watch your mouth. If you know someone never will hurt you no matter what you do or say, you often transgress farther than you would than if you know that person is not going to tolerate that. So if you have a hippy-dippy guy who's a soy boy, who his wife is the domineering one, and he isn't the leader at all in the family, and then let's say you got Mike Tyson, and who you gonna insult and not feel scared of? Right? So you're gonna go insult Mike Tyson, and as Mike Tyson said once famously, social media got you guys too comfortable with insulting people and not getting punched in the face. Probably butchered that quote, but that was the gist of it. Is that people know that some have a threshold. Cross that line, hands are being thrown. And if you're smart and you want to keep your jaw, you're gonna be careful how you navigate yourself. But there's a balance, right? Short-term competition, well, North Korea and China do generational warfare. So their competition is long-term. Okay? And so if you're against short-term competition, is she herself also against long-term competition? You know? Something to think about. The strict father worldview is failing on its own terms, even as the world trembles in the unstable fists of authoritarian strongmen we elect to run the planet off the rails. The West, terrified by the future, chose strict fathers to lead it into the frightening, febrile adolescence of the 21st century. But those strict fathers turned out to be faithless, boorish brutes, utterly unfit for the responsibility that came with the power. Men like Trump, like Pence, like Johnson and Bolsonaro and Modi, and before them men like George W. Bush, like David Cameron, Scott Morrison. Okay, so Modi's that dude of India. Trump, he married a supermodel, and Melania used to do like very provocative, hyper slutty photo shoots. Okay. And Pence, he's boring and stale and very establishment in the corporate sense. I don't look at Pence and think anything. He's just like something of like the 1950s. I don't know. He seems like somebody who would be a CEO, but he would be playing chess on the table and wondering when he's going golfing next. Trump is just a classic playboy. I don't see anything, and he's funny, plays golf, a businessman. He's more soft than most New Yorkers, I'd argue. A lot of people from New York, you know, I'm walking over you. What's the matter with you? Where's my coffee? Like, they're really in your face. Bolsonaro, I don't know much about him other than that he got shanked in the stomach when he was ruling. But I follow him on Getter, but I don't really see much of him. So Modi, he's oppressing Muslims, but I don't know. He's a Hindutva, right? The radical Hindus. So I don't really get how Mike Pence and Modi are being put in the same category. George W. Bush was a good old boy moron. Like, if you see the old memes of Bush gaffes, ain't nobody afraid of him. He was very low IQ. He's not as savage as his father. He's not as cunning and clever as his father, as Bush Sr. George W. Bush is probably one of the dumbest presidents America ever had. Have you seen his paintings that he does? He's such an idiot. He's very low IQ, you know. His brother Jeb Bush seems more smarter than him. Like, Bush is just like a Texas rancher guy who's goofy, and the establishment neoconservatives told him to start wars, and that's what he did, and he just read the teleprompter and did as he was told. I mean, his dad was what? Wasn't his dad in the CIA? Like, his dad's more scary. Bush just seems like you give him a ribeye steak, garlic mashed potatoes with some brown gravy, and he'll dance the tune you say, you know. May Allah have mercy on all the Muslims that he hurt. These are men who are and were masters at the moral logic of self-interest. No, I don't think so. I don't. Trump is selfish, true, you know. But Bush, he don't come across as that. Who knew nothing but how to lie and cheat and bully their way to power. They believe themselves born to. Trump, he control, but I mean, show me a politician that don't lie. You gonna sit here and tell me that Obama never lied? You can keep your doctor with Obamacare, all this stuff. Come on now. They were as brutal and untrustworthy in their private lives as they were as leaders of nations. And millions of citizens living under that unpredictable savagery saw a language of private shame and terror repeated on a global scale. I mean, look what happened to Haiti right now. They're in complete disaster mode. There's tons of places that are very violent that have nothing to do with, you know, milquetoast establishment corporate people. The way strict father leaders treat their citizens is that way the abusive men treat their wives and children, with brutal entitled contempt. Notice how she didn't mention Xi Jinping of China. And the way that women, immigrants, working class people, young people, disabled people, queer people, and people of color are forced to live under strict father systems of governance is the way. Okay, so let's hold up. Let's see what people of color, so Latinos, are forced to live under strict father systems of governance. Okay, so what about Fidel Castro? Alright, what about that? He was a socialist of Cuba. You're gonna sit here and tell me that there wasn't brown Cubans who... There's black Cubans as well. You know, that they weren't like, you know, we want that. What about the tribes all over Africa? What about them? Let's write that down. The tribes of Africa. Now, Egypt's in Africa. Egypt is Muslim. But there's the Congo, Ghana. There's patriarchal tribes and rural tribes that still exist. The tribes in Brazil, right? These men want that and the women want it, and there's lots of black Muslims in Africa. So, you notice how she's pretending all white people are evil, and all blacks, they don't want to have the patriarchal system, which is just false. Abused women and children learn to live under the aegis of an unpredictable father figure, negotiating, retreating into shame and self-blame, wearing themselves out to appease a cruel and volatile power structure. And one of the mothers who... I'm not trying to do whataboutism, but there's a lot of women who terrorize everyone in the family. You know, I couldn't imagine. Ryan Long did a skit of the feminist mom. Oh, I think I didn't have a feminist mom. I'd rather have my whore mother than a feminist mom. Learning to mistrust our own desires, to fear the small and howling human core of us that says that we are worthy, that we are allowed to want things. There is another alternative, of course. You can leave the house of the father. You can walk out of there and not look back. You can refuse to obey the dictate of compulsory domesticity, refuse to be an obedient daughter. Okay, what is she saying you to do? Rebellion, the sign of Shaitan. Rebellion against your father. And what are the girls gonna be left with? When they rebelled against their father, cut off their main security force, is their new pimp gonna look out for them? Is their feminist that they met at UC Berkeley gonna look out for them? Probably not. A lot of women, when they're young, hot, and fornicating, very liberal, very this, then they get to be in their 30s and they settle down and they have an epiphany about spirituality, and then they get married. All of a sudden they start to be more conservative, a lot of them. Unless they're smoking tons of weed and on Adderall and chugging Bloody Marys. To tell daughters not to obey their fathers is to set them up for atrocities. If you have a wicked father, like I wouldn't listen to very much my father would say concerning relationships or many things. But if he was to give me some advice about something he had expertise in, maybe I would take it to hand, but definitely not relationships. So I can see what she's saying if you have a wicked father. But if you have a strong father who says, honey, stay away from that boy, marry a good man, and he looks out for you, then you should take his advice. Or a long-suffering wife, you can pursue forms of family that do not require you to suffer in silence and squash down your selfhood. You never, if you have to squash down who you are, then you need to express it in another way. And that's up to you. You know, you can't put your selfhood upon someone else's emotional state. It's just not good. If the family you came from sucked, make up a new one, writes Lydia Yukanatvik. in her searing memoir of survival, The Chronology of Water, look at all the people there are to choose from. If the family you're in hurts, get on the bus, like now. Womanhood is coded as work, and like any work, those with the least control are taught to believe that freedom to choose one's own oppression is the only freedom worth imagining. Freedom to choose one's own oppression is the only freedom worth imagining. Okay, so you're gonna be oppressed in your job. You know, you're not gonna have like some of these tech jobs in San Francisco where you go into the break room and there's wine on tap, kombucha on tap, and there's like a very fancy latte corner, and there's a cafeteria with custom salads, and there's a yoga studio, and you get to just relax. It's very, very rare. Very, very rare. So, and even then, if you have that job, it's going to be daunting. You're in politics, you're not really with your family. You're traveling, campaigning. Whichever duty you take upon in life is going to really overwhelm you at times. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained for us to be tested and tried. Okay? This planet is not a planet you can escape suffering from. You can mitigate risks. You can cope and manage certain difficulties. But through suffering, you gain nearness to Allah if you use that suffering to get closer to Him and learn from the lessons. And if you remain like Prophet Job, peace be upon him, where you don't lose faith because of your trials. You have to remain grateful. Which of your favors of your Lord will you deny? You have to remember that. There are going to be challenges for you as a stay-at-home mom. There's going to be challenges for you as a corporate woman. You just have to see which path is the one that's going to offer you more fulfillment regardless of the suffering. If someone wants to be a chef, they're going to have a lot of hours. If someone wants to be a florist, they're going to have stresses as well. You want to be a cattle rancher? It's going to be messy business. You want to be a zookeeper? It's going to be messy business. You want to be a vet? You're going to see some tragedies of animal abuse. You know, if you become a doctor, you're going to have to be able to have a strong stomach and look at infected things. You're going to be in a mortuary. You're going to have to get used to the stench of death, no matter which way you square it. Doctors have to tell people, I'm sorry, but your cancer is terminal. There's tons of fields in human existence where it's not fun. What about those people who they have to... I buy cruelty-free products as much as possible. There's a label law for like cruelty-free products. You can put it on there if it is. But L'Oreal, all these makeup companies rub the makeup into rabbits' eyes and to see if it causes irritation before they can sell it. They do animal testing. So the person who has to hurt animals to earn their money so that women can buy makeup, that's a hard thing to sleep with every day. Abortionists, they're pulling little teeny tiny hands and little teeny tiny toes out and putting them into a bag and, you know, smelling that blood. The smell of death. Their eyes have to look at how they earn their wealth. Examine that. To me, to earn money that way is oppressive to the soul. Then under late-stage capitalism, that work has become more insecure, more precarious, and more dangerous. If womanhood is work, then women need to organize and strike for better conditions. See this call to action? Better conditions. If you recall, I posted a hadith where a believer is guaranteed clothing, shelter, bread, and water. Really examine that hadith. Don't be a beggar, but don't be a hoarder, don't be a miser. And learn to be content, but also supplicate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for your provision. Islam has the best balance. What she calls you to is ingratitude, but her solutions are not sustainable. And that's just what is happening. As I write, something is changing. The COVID-19 crisis has laid bare just how essential women's work is to the day-to-day functioning of society. Okay, but they shut people down. The government didn't let people work, and unemployment wasn't enough to pay people's bills, and this took away people's savings. You know, did they build any more new hospitals? No, they didn't. As worldwide quarantine orders force individuals to take on the full-time burden of education and caring for children, the sick, the elderly, and isolated, women have been forced out of the paid workplace in their millions as, even in global pandemic, male partners simply refuse to roll up their sleeves and do their part. In the UK, by some measures, women with children were doing 2.5 times as much domestic work as men. Okay, but how much do... Oh my god. Okay, so chores. Okay. Vacuum. Clean the bathroom. Dust. Wash dishes. Windex the windows. Shampoo the carpets. Is that a lot? You know, if you don't want to do it, you're gonna pay someone to do it. Today my husband cleaned out the fridge. I didn't ask him to. He just wanted to clean it and rinse it and wipe it down. That was beautiful. I didn't ask him. But, hey, I love it, you know. Maybe some women have men who don't have spontaneous things that they do. But someone can, if you talk to them and explain to them, maybe they will. But reciprocation. You ask, then he has the right to ask you for something. Right? These are the same women who will say men must do chores, but women don't have to give intimacy to their husbands when their husbands want. You can deny him intimacy. So if he says, I'll do chores, but I want more intimacy per week, what would she say? That's abuse. You see? Needs. She's all about me, and I need this and I need that, and then thinking, oh, he don't need nothing. Oh, his needs, it's not important. Selfishness. Pure, raw selfishness. Social media has shattered the illusion that what happens in private homes cannot be political. Suddenly pretending to cope seems very last season. The million glossy mane mothers of Instagram have permission to relax their rictus grins and be very honest about how they're barely holding it together. For the very first time, women have the technology to compare notes and their shared experiences. And that could change everything, just as they did with the Me Too movement, where women began to speak with unprecedented unity about the private, intimate injustice of sexual violence. The street, as novelist William Gibson once observed, finds its own use for technology, and so does the home. It's time for domestic work to have its Me Too movement. It's the time that this private injustice became public concern. Well, I get part of what she's saying, you know, if you have someone who never helps, but I think if you're a stay-at-home mom, you can get some help, you know, because what you're doing is you're taking care of the children, but there's a balance, right? I think men already really do that, and a lot of men pay landscapers, pay painters, pay roofers, pay plumbers. A lot of stuff can be delegated out. But if you go around the world and see like some rural village life, the women tend to things inside and the husbands are out under the heat dealing with the crops. You know, it really does come down to what kind of man you picked and what kind of wife you'll be. But this woman is very insufferable. Very insufferable. Firstly, men must be called to account individually and collectively for refusing to do the basic work of care that living in a community demands of everyone. Society must accept that there is nothing in nature that makes women better suited to wiping bottoms, and that love does not require any person to be an unpaid drudge. My husband helps with diapers, so that's wonderful. I'll be cooking and he'll change, and I don't have to ask him. You know, if you have a husband who refuses to change a diaper, I think that's wrong. You know, a father should love his child. You know, if she's praying and the baby does a poop nugget, you can't just leave the baby in the diaper, and you shouldn't tell her to stop praying so she can change the diaper while you scroll on your phone. Right? There's a balance. That an adult man who can't run a dishwasher without being asked has no business running anything more complex, like a company or a country. Well, to be fair, do we all know how to work every type of technology? I mean, I don't have a dishwasher, I wash by hand. But there's tons of machines we women don't know how to use. So if we don't know how to use those machines, should we then not be allowed to vote? See, how many women are mechanics? Huh? So if you drive a car but you don't know how to fix an engine, why should you be able to run a company? An engine is pretty complicated. How many women don't really know how to work their computers, like me? You know, there's a lot of machines that are weird. And, I mean, to be fair, there's some laundry machines that are pretty fancy. You know, I like the old-fashioned one. Put the quarter in. Perm press. Hot water. Size of the load. Start. If you get these high-tech ones, they're like, scan your QR code, or put this in, and I'm like, just press, I just want to wash it, come on now. What if it's like a super fancy dishwasher shit? Then expecting your partner to shoulder the majority of the domestic work for free without complaining is not just disrespectful, it is morally unconscionable. Okay, so tell him, honey, you want me to do the chores, you gonna give me that booty, or give me some money to go to the spa. You can find a way, or give me sushi on Friday. Like, I have DoorDash Mondays, where I like to get some food on DoorDash on Mondays when we're able. Not all the time, but sometimes. You know, that's my compensation. That the problem is not simply that women have too much work to do, but that men are refusing to do their share, and they need to start doing it. And if they don't know how, they need to learn. So she wants 50-50 chores. 50-50 chores. Does she then want 50-50 bills? I know a lot of women who don't want to go 50-50 with bills. They don't want to do that. So if a man says, okay, you want me to do 50-50 chores? Okay, we're going to go 50-50 bills. Something to think about. Secondly, governments must begin to treat domestic and care work as work, to recognize that work within the economy and back that recognition up with cash. The infrastructure of education, healthcare, social security, elder care, and child care that has been privatized and defunded over the past 40 years must be revitalized and properly funded. So that means more taxes, so that the burden of reproducing life is no longer foisted onto black, brown, immigrant, and working class women. Okay, so not all immigrants are white, and not all immigrants are brown. So there's plenty of white immigrants. So are you advocating for them? Because she left out white people. She's very racist, this lady. And working class women. The work of care, the work of common survival has never been more critical than it is now. And like all monumental tasks, the work of keeping the species alive through the coming century will be more manageable if we can find a way, finally, to share it. Okay. Well. Social Security, I think, is important. I agree with that. Elder care, old folks' homes are pretty scary. I don't want to be in one. Healthcare you need private and you need public, but My husband went to one of the public funded community dentists, and when they went to remove one of his wisdom teeth, they poked in his lip and really hurt it because they had to put that needle in there. And just the care, the overall medical care in those clinics is horrendous. Horrendous. And me having Kaiser, there's way better quality in maternal care. And that's a private healthcare. So I think you have to have both. You can't just have government ones because those are nightmarish. I've given birth in public and private hospitals, and the private hospital was better. Cleaner, safer, doctors actually cared more. In the public one, it was more ratchet, run down, and the nurses constantly smelled like cigarettes and looked like they hated their life and that they haven't slept in years. And the nurses in the private one, they were way more friendly. They didn't seem like they hated me, you know. It's fascinating, you know. And I have to say, some of the best nurses were the Asian women. Very caring, very attentive. Kaiser had a very good hospital experience for me. You know, so something to think about. Let me know what you think. Man, telling girls to rebel against their dads, to have hookup culture, not to really have marriage, to tear apart the social fabric of the patriarchy, to put career over family, to assume that a daycare can do the exact same job as you and that it won't affect your kid. I mean, how many children miss their parents, you know, while being at a daycare? It's really quite sad when you look at it. Not really a good look, I'd argue. The liberal mindset is definitely not one of health. I don't find them spiritually healthy. Let me know what you think. Like, comment, and subscribe. And if you'd like to support my work, you can go to www.subscribestar.com/MilahanArchive. Hope to see you there.